So today's case is about the Hello Kitty murder case. And I'm sure most of you have heard about this case as it's quite a popular one that's often talked about in like true crimes, forums and things like that. But before we get on with the case, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up, and feel free to let me know the cases you think I should cover. And without any further ado, let's get on with the case. I want to give a little bit of a warning on this case. It's very disturbing and it's very graphic. So Fán Mǐnyí was born in 1975 and was abandoned by her family as a child, resulting in her being raised in an all-girls orphanage. When she turned 15, she was told to leave the orphanage because they had an age restriction. Becoming homeless and addicted to drugs, Fán was forced into street prostitution until the age of 21, when she began working at a brothel. If you don't know what brothel means, it is a place where people engage in sexual activity with prostitutes. Fán eventually married one of her clients, a fellow drug addict, in 1996. She gave birth to their son 2 years later, not long before her murder. Fán's husband was described as abusive, and neighbors would report being woken up by sounds of the couple's fights and the child screaming and crying from their apartment. Upon the pregnancy and then birth of her son, Fán decided to turn her life around in order to protect her son and provide him a safer life. She quit drugs and prostitution, got a job as a hostess at a brothel, and eventually left her violent husband shortly before her murder. Due to these sacrifices, she had a much lower income and struggled to support herself and her family. So one day, Man-yee had this regular client around. His name was Cáng. He was a member of the triads and he always came to Fán Mǐnyí. She was like his favorite. And Man-yee decided that once they had finished up and everything, she was going to steal his wallet. And Chan Lok's wallet had around 4,000 Hong Kong dollars in it, which is equivalent to about 400 British pounds and roughly 500 US dollars. Eventually, Lok found about this. That was just them two in the room. It was way too dangerous to even try, but she did. So Chan Lok demanded that Man-yee pay back that full $4,000 plus 10,000 interest because she disrespected him, and he probably threatened her that if she didn't get this money to him, he would do something to her. So Man-yee managed to get together this $4,000 and she gave it back to Lok. And he was like, where was the other 10,000? So Man-yee said that she was gonna get him it, but it was gonna take her a little bit longer. And he didn't like that. Lok knew that he was probably never gonna get that money back from Man-yee, and he was scared that maybe she was gonna do a runner and try and get out of paying him at all. So he decided that the next logical thing to do in this situation would be to enlist the help of two of his triad friends and kidnap Man-yee. So a 34-year-old Chan Lok and his friends 27-year-old Long Cheng Chow and 21-year-old Long Weil On were set out to find Man-yee. So on March of 17th, 1999, the men actually came across Man-yee on the side of the road. She was back to work in the streets, obviously, because she was way too scared to go back to that brothel where she knew that Lok would probably be. So these three men grabbed Fán Mǐnyí and put her in the back of the vehicle and drove her to the property that the triad owned. So they took her to this old rundown, unfurnished, dingy, dark apartment Literally, like the walls were crumbling. The pictures are horrendous. So the plan was that Chan Man Lok was gonna make Fán Mǐnyí pay off her debt, be it through money or through services. He was going to set up a little mini brothel. With just Fán Mǐnyí, there weren't gonna be any other girls there, and she was going to provide services for him and his friends and his associates, work colleagues, whatever, until she managed to pay off his debts. So, on the first night that the men had Man-yee in this apartment, it was just the three of them, and they all decided to beat and rape her all night, just all into the hours of the morning. And most of the information, bear in mind that I'm about to tell you about this whole case, has actually came from a teenage girl. Now you must be wondering, what about that teenage girl? So in May of 1999, police in Tsim Sha Tsui in Hong Kong had a very distressed teenage girl coming to their police station, and this girl had just turned 14, and she came alone, no parents, no friends or anything, and she was very clearly distressed. And she sat there and she told police that she thought she was being haunted, and because she was so obviously worked up and stressed about this, they just let her talk. Even though the police obviously don't deal with paranormal things and stuff like that, they just let her kind of get everything out to them. So this girl told police about this one particular spirit that would come to her every night. It was a young woman in her 20s. She had blood all over her, and this teenage girl felt that the only way that she could get the spirit to stop coming to her was if she went to the police. And that was when police realized why this girl had come to the police station. This teenage girl confessed that she had taken part in the month-long torture and murder of a young woman in her 20s, and this spirit was the victim coming back to haunt her until she confessed. So the identity of this teenage girl is being protected through this whole case. No one knows who she is or she really was. She just referred to in every single sources are formed. She was 14 when she went to the police station. However, she was only 13 when she took part in that crime. But she wasn't alone in this. She was actually part of a group. However, she was the youngest and was the only female. All the other people in this group were males, in their 20s and 30s. They were very powerful men, members of triads, if you know what that is. It's essentially like the Chinese mafia. It's organized crime, very, very rich, very, very powerful and scary people. She sat and told police that it was mainly all of the men that were doing this to that woman, and she just occasionally joined in. And the way she got into this whole thing is, obviously she was the odd one out. The rest of them were older men. The way she got into this was because one of these older men was actually her boyfriend. She was only 13 years old and her boyfriend in this group was 34. Now back to the timeline. So as I said earlier, that the information that I've just told you came from the teenage girl, because these men will not talk about what they have done, and so pretty much everything is from this teenage girl. So this is just what they have told her or what she was personally witnessed. So this teenage girl would also join in with everything that they were doing to Man-yee. And at first it was all just like beating her with their bare hands and things like that. But then eventually weapons were brought into the picture. They would use metal bars and kitchen utensils and bats. And I even read pieces of furniture, and this girl said that the men would force Fán Mǐnyí to smile and laugh and tell them how happy and excited she was about her beatings. And if she wouldn't do that, they would beat her even harder. Before long, Fán Mǐnyí was so brutally beaten that she could no longer really provide these services that the men were trying to make her do to get out of this debt. Like realistically, she couldn't really move, and potential clients that were to pay for sex with her were no longer attracted to her. They would say to these men, well, why would we pay for sex with this girl that we are not attracted to and that can't do anything, when they could just go out on the street and find someone that they're attracted to? So Manlock's plan to make her pay off his debt wasn't really gonna work, but he didn't really care at this point. He now had his own personal punching bag. As you must have known by now, this man is sick. He liked having a hostage that he could do whatever he wanted to. And when they were not doing things to Fán Mǐnyí, all these men would hang out in a separate room and play video games and do crystal meth and just really hang out together as if there were not a dying woman in the next room. As the days went on, the men started getting more creative with the ways that they would torture Man-yee. They began melting and burning plastic onto her body, dripping candle wax on her body, and when they ran out of things to burn, they just kind of burned her directly. They would particularly burn the bottoms of her feet so she couldn't stand up. She couldn't walk, she couldn't do anything. Not that she could really anyway, because she was really weak at this point. They found uses for pretty much every single kitchen. Appliances, kitchen utensil, and I don't know what they were doing to her with these things, but I don't think I want to know. Obviously, they would wound her, and when she would have like big gashes on her and things like that, the men would take food and spices and excrement and dirt, and they would stuff it in her wounds and like smear it on her open cuts. They also forced Mǐnyí to consume her own urine and feces, and I think they were starving her as well at the same time of like normal food. And if she refused to eat her own whatever, like if she struggled to do it, if she was gagging, or if she threw up, the men would beat her. Around halfway through her captivity, Fán Mǐnyí, like I said, was so weak that she could barely move. She was so badly beaten that she was starving. The bottoms of her feet were burned, so even if she wanted to walk anywhere, she couldn't really, and this was kind of ruining the boy's fun. She was no longer fun to beat and do certain things to her because she wasn't reacting as much. So one of the men suggested that they suspend Fán Mǐnyí in the air, making her easier to beat, which is horrendous. She was a physical punching bag for these guys. So they tied up her wrists with electrical cords and then tied up to the other end to the ceiling fan so that she was kind of hanging there, and they would leave her there for hours at a time, sometimes even overnight. And then on the 15th of April, almost a full month after Man-yee was abducted and brought to this place, the group decided that they wanted to go out for food. So there was all three men and Manlock's 13-year-old girlfriend. And as they often did when they went out, they would lock Fán Mǐnyí in the bathroom so she couldn't try to escape. So they all went out for food and then came back to the apartment a couple of hours later, and that was when Chan, Manlock's 13-year-old girlfriend, went to the bathroom and found Fán Mǐnyí dead in the bathroom. I mean, this is particularly disturbing, but her body was just oozing this thick orange-like pus. I don't know how to explain, but it was, and there was a lot of it. I have seen some photos, and that's another thing I want to warn you about. If you go and research this case by yourself, please be careful because there are photos online and they are so disturbing. When I found them, I didn't want to see them. I never went again and looked up things like that, like ever again. So at this point, the group were in shock. I mean, I don't know if they were ever planning on killing Fán Mǐnyí or if they thought they could just go on like that forever. As if the body of Fán Mǐnyí just gonna keep bouncing back and like as if it wasn't gonna give up. I just don't think that they expected it to happen so soon, and so they didn't have a plan. They didn't know what to do, and now they have a dead body in this apartment and it was going to start to smell and they needed to do something about it. They need to dispose of it. So all the men and this guy's girlfriend go into the other room and they're all talking about different things they could do to Fán Mǐnyí's body. They slept on it overnight, and when they thought about it the next morning, Chan Man-lok decided that he had the best plan out of everyone. He said that her body could not remain in one piece, otherwise it would be far too easy to identify. It had been hard to dispose of, and it make it so much easier for them if her body was in smaller pieces. So because Manny's body was already in the bathtub, Chan Man-lok took a butcher's knife and began dismembering her body. And then to remove the flesh from the bones, they decided that they were going to put her body parts in a pot on the stove and boil the flesh and the muscle and everything off of the bone. Well, some sources even say that at one point while her body parts were being cooked on the stove, some of the men were cooking noodles right next to her in another pot, which is so disturbing. All the sources said that the men, after they were done doing whatever they were doing, they actually used that same pot to cook food in which they did whatever with the body parts of Fán Mǐnyí, which is incredibly disturbing. Once they finished boiling all of the skin, all of the tissues, all of the muscles from Fán Mǐnyí's head, they actually took Fán Mǐnyí's skull and stuffed it inside of a Hello Kitty mermaid doll, and then sewed the whole thing back up. And if you were wondering why this was called a Hello Kitty murder, that's because of it that they stuffed the head inside of a Hello Kitty doll. Can you, what? The only things that police actually ever found of Fán Mǐnyí's body were, of course, her skull in this doll and one of her teeth on the floor and some of her organs in the fridge. But of course, without a full body, police couldn't identify who this was. And of course, the cause of death was not determined either. And now this is where the case gets quite complicated. So on one hand, we have got this 13-year-old girlfriend saying this whole story, the whole torture, the murder story, the kidnapping. Meanwhile, the men had a completely different story. They said that they were just running and very small brothel with just Fán Mǐnyí, and it was all consensual and everything. However, Fán Mǐnyí was a drug addict. She was addicted to meth, and on this one particular day, she accidentally overdosed on meth. And the man supposedly panicked because she was supposed to be under their care. They were not supposed to let this kind of thing happen. And the men said that they knew that they would be in trouble if one of their sex workers had died of a drug overdose, and so to hide the body, they stuffed it in a Hello Kitty doll and did all this stuff. Of course, the fact that they dismembered and tried to dispose of her body was very, very bad, and police could see that, and she died under their supervision either way. While police couldn't prove that they tortured and killed this girl, they could say that she died under their supervision and then they tried to hide it, which looks very suspicious. And since police didn't have enough evidence that shows that the man killed Fán Mǐnyí, they were all charged with manslaughter. They were all given life sentences without the possibility of parole for 20 years. All three men were visited by psychiatrists after this because this is obviously a horrendous crime. You have to be some level of messed up to be able to do this. But I don't think psychiatrists found anything wrong in these guys. They had no remorse, they had no emotion, but they were not actually mentally ill. The teenage girl, although she did take part in the torture and rape from Fán Mǐnyí, she was actually let free without any charges or anything because obviously she gave so much evidence against the men, evidence that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So after this whole murder and everything, because of the accounts that this 13-year-old girl gave to the police about Fán Mǐnyí, spirit coming to her and everything, people that believe in ghosts and spirits and stuff believed that Fán Mǐnyí's spirit was very easy to contact. It was like available. So the apartment in which she died actually became quite like a meeting place for people that were interested in this, people that wanted to contact her spirit. And at first it seemed quite like innocent as that can be. It just seemed like interest and just people that are into that stuff wanted to contact her. But after a while it seemed to be kind of sinister. It became pretty disrespectful and people were doing questionable things at this place. And so in 2012 it was actually demolished. As for the updates of this man, now this is kind of scary, but obviously because this crime happened in 1999 and they were allowed parole after 20 years, that means they are allowed parole anytime now. I really do hope that the people at their parole hearing take into account and remember that what they have done. Like, I just hope they don't just try and get them out because it'll be cheaper, These men did some unthinkable things to that woman. And they are obviously capable of doing it all again. Also remember that they showed no remorse, no emotion when it happened. And as for Fán Mǐnyí's son, like I said, she gave birth to a little boy just 2 years before she died. He is actually currently a student in Singapore. And while he has no memory of his mother, obviously, he was only 2 years old at that time. He does always wear one of her necklaces that police gave to him. And for now, that's all I have for this case. Thank you all for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up, and also let me know what kind of videos you would like me to cover for my next video in the comment section below.